All right, I would like to call to order the Monday, February 18th meeting of the Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Spade.
Here.
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Kitzler.
Here.
Alder Koer.
Here.
Alder Groupie.
Here.
Alder Moore.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 4th meeting?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. There are no, well, I guess we do have some appearances. I have several sheets for people, and let me just sort through these. Some of whom I'll list the first two if you want to come up to speak, and then we'll list the others who just wanted to register in favor in a moment. Don Ferber, 4700 Alice Avenue, Madison, would like to speak in favor of, as resolution number.
Clean energy resolution.
Pardon?
The clean energy resolution.
The clean energy resolution. Okay, if you could please come up to the podium and state your name and address, and we're going to try to limit these to 3 minutes because we have a very long agenda tonight.
Thank you. My name is Don Ferber. I live at 4700 Alice Avenue in Madison, so I confess to not being a Monona resident, but trying to be a good neighbor here. As you know, Madison has passed a resolution for 100% renewable energy, as has Middleton, and I'm very glad to see that Monona is working to join the group too. I think it's very forward-looking. I think you've got a great resolution. It's been well thought out in terms of staging what needs to happen. And I am a volunteer both with the Sierra Club and 350 Madison. The Sierra Club has ready for 100 cities. I'm not sure what the latest is, but I know it's over 75 across the country. 350 has fossil-free communities, and so the idea is for local communities both to aim at getting off fossil fuels. Something that's very much needed, especially since our federal government has been rather antagonistic to clean energy, as at least in the past has our state government been. So I think local areas are where a lot of the action is. I think you're doing a great thing to step up, including not only dealing with climate change, but also looking in terms of mitigating it, but also adapting to the effects of climate change, something that will be very much needed. I also want to applaud an emphasis on equity and dealing with those who have been most impacted and are most disadvantaged by some of what's happening with our utility rates and otherwise. So, I mean, I don't know more what questions you're going to have, but thank you very much for considering this.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Sarah Moran would like to speak in favor. And after that, the next one will be Laura Peprocki. And if you could give us your address as well.
Yep. Hello. My address is 6300 Sylvan Lane in Monona. And I am just here to talk a little bit about the health effects of voting or using renewable energy. My background is I'm a journalist. I've worked for the Wall Street Journal, Mayo Clinic, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and my focus is on health and wellness reporting. And so my job is doing a lot of research and or reading the research and interviewing doctors and scientists and other health professionals about some of the things that affect our health. And after my years of doing this work as a journalist, I feel that the number one health issue of our time is the environment. And burning fossil fuels, we know, is contributing to some of the rising rates of disease and illness. Burning fossil fuels emits harmful toxic pollutants that affect our air supply, our water supply, and our food supply. And as you know, most of our local energy right now is coming from burning fossil fuels. The main source that MG&E uses is coal. And just one interesting thing about coal, it's the number one source of mercury emissions in our country. And I think we all know mercury is incredibly harmful and toxic, even in very small amounts. It has a toxic effect on the nervous system, the immune system, the digestive system, your lungs, your kidneys, and many other things. And mercury is just one example of one of the toxic pollutants that come out into our environment when we burn fossil fuels. And I would say people seem to understand that, pollution and chemicals that are a part of that are causing the rise, are contributing to the rise in a lot of the respiratory diseases and illnesses like asthma and allergies and COPD. But there's a lot of other chronic illnesses that we don't always connect the dots about, that we know are related to chemical exposure and toxins. Those include cancer, heart attacks, strokes, high blood pressure, diabetes, weight gain, obesity, thyroid disease. It's also linked to behavioral problems, ADHD, and shorter attention spans. The World Health Organization says environmental hazards overall are having a devastating impact on global health. And years ago, the organization warned that chronic disease, including neurocognitive disease, autoimmune disease, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic disease, is quickly reaching epidemic levels across the globe. And we know that toxins are playing a role in those rising rates. In 2010, the President's Cancer Panel, after lots of research, stated that the true burden of environmentally induced cancer has been grossly underestimated, and that the public remains largely unaware of many common environmental carcinogens. This is an interesting piece of information. A study at Harvard University determined that by switching to clean, renewable energy, a region can save between $6 million and $210 million, depending on the region, in public health and climate costs per year. Burning fossil fuels for energy obviously takes a huge hit on our health and is contributing to the rise in many chronic illnesses and mysterious symptoms that people are experiencing that affect every system in our bodies. And so voting for renewable energy is a huge vote for our health. So just want to thank you for support for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Paprocki?
Okay, I'm gonna set a timer.
Okay, we've got
See
one
me
here
looking,
too.
it's only because I'm setting a timer.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Laura Paprocki. I live at 5001 Wallace Avenue, Monona, Wisconsin, 53716. And I am a Monona resident, and I also own a small business and have for 12 years called Trinity Environmental, and it focuses all on energy efficiency in residential, existing homes and new construction. So many of the Monona residents know me because I've done energy audits on their homes, and I've actually recently been recruited by MG&E because they wanted a strong building scientist on staff. So I have this very interesting mix of perspectives at this point. And what I want to speak about is just as a city, if we are able to move forward with the resolution, it's going to be that the marker for the rest of our community, the residential community and the small businesses, to move forward and to see our city doing this and leading as an example. And whether it's having a home energy assessment, home performance with Energy Star assessment, where you have the blower door and you have the infrared camera scan, or getting new construction certified, there's so many things that residents can still do that we can help lead them on the energy efficiency side of things. And then when it comes to renewables, right, because first you have to take care of your energy efficiency. Does not make sense to move towards renewables until you are wholeheartedly taking care of your efficiency. But since working at MG&E, I have got to know their programs more, and it is ridiculously easy for anyone, business or residential person, to sign up right now for Green Power Tomorrow, which is our local utility, their local wind, so one in Wisconsin, two in Iowa, our community solar projects all bundled up, and you pay 1 cent more per kilowatt hour. So right now, typical residential is 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So you'd be paying 14 cents per kilowatt hour to have your energy supporting clean energy, okay? It's got to be the cheapest, easiest way. You can go online right now and click to have 100% of your energy coming from local renewable. If that's not good enough, we are working with the Public Service Commission. It was supposed to be launched weeks ago, but we are highly regulated. Every I that's dotted, T that's crossed, Public Service Commission has to bless that. We have a huge community solar, so people can buy into community solar, and okay, that's my timer, and they'll actually get a lower per kWh rate than typical, although they do have to buy a block of solar. So even if you don't want to put solar on your rooftop, there are good your local utility has programs that you can support. And that's huge, because not everybody can put solar on the rooftops, and it doesn't always make sense even if you can. So there's lots of ways, easy ways, that our city and our community can move towards this by using the things we already have in place.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
You're a very enthusiastic salesperson.
Well, 3 minutes, you know.
Heather Allen. And then next will be Beth Esser.
Laptop on your laptop. Hi, yes, I'm Heather Allen with Renew Wisconsin. Thank you for taking up this topic of renewable energy today, introducing it and considering it at your future meetings. I work for Renew Wisconsin. We are a clean energy advocacy organization. We've been working in Wisconsin on wind, solar, biogas, and geothermal since 1991. And we've been around in we've been involved in every major renewable energy and energy efficiency fight in the state since that time. And we are really excited to see where we are today. I mean, the previous speaker couldn't have said it better. This is the art of the possible. We're now talking about things that are very possible and very doable. And it's very exciting to see communities like Monona taking the next step. I just want to give you a couple of examples of the progress we've seen sort of on the larger utility scale. Just recently in Colorado, there was an open bidding process which resulted in dozens of wind, solar, and battery storage proposals. Selecting the lowest cost set of projects, Colorado policymakers and utilities were able to identify a set of projects that replaced existing coal generation while saving ratepayers $213 million to $374 million. And Wisconsin utilities are pursuing renewable energy as well. Just last week, in their quarterly earnings call, WEC, the largest utility in the state, announced that they've made real progress reducing their carbon emissions. In fact, they are now on track to exceed their own goals of a 40% reduction below 2005 levels by the year 2023. And the reason this and more is possible is because the cost of wind and solar have dropped precipitously. Wind has dropped by 66% in cost over the last 10 years, and solar has dropped 88% in the last 10 years. So for utilities, the business case is there. We have seen the Badger Hollow Solar Project and the Two Creeks Solar Project up in Manitowoc, Kewaunee counties coming before the Public Service Commission. There should be votes next month, very likely, to approve these projects. And these projects could replace, these are projects large enough to replace fossil fuel generation. MG&E is a off-taker of both of those projects, which will help shift their energy mix. So Alliant has committed to 80% by 2050. WEC has committed to 80% by 2050. Xcel has committed to 100% CO2 elimination by 2050. Madison Gas and Electric, 80% by 2050. So you are in very good company. The experts in energy are saying this is possible, and they're doing it. With the 100% renewable energy resolution, the City of Monona will both spur that transition forward by making a commitment to renewables and incentivizing other communities and utilities and your partners to make similar progress.
I think your time is just about up.
Just one last sentence.
Okay.
With all these positive trends, your commitment to renewable energy will benefit from the changing economics that we're seeing all around us, and will demonstrate that this is a wise choice for the health, welfare, and economic future of your residents in Monona.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth Esser. And after Beth, Lisa Gunlock.
Hi, I'm Beth Esser. I live at 6009 Ridgewood Avenue in Monona. I'm here tonight to talk from a citizen and family perspective on the renewable energy resolution. First, I'd like to thank the Sustainability Committee, many of its members are here tonight, for their efforts to bring forth this resolution. And I just want to state that it's really way overdue for the United States and the world to be taking serious action to address climate change. That's why it's essential for the council not only to pass the resolution, but to take immediate steps to put all the items in the resolution into place. I'm glad I don't have to convince any of you, I believe, about the facts of climate change. If I were speaking to a different leaders, world leaders, our president, perhaps, that would be a different conversation, but I think that's why it's really important to have local action. I want to emphasize that what we are facing is a crisis and it is urgent. I had considered bringing my children tonight. They're 9 and 6, and they would for sure tell you that they support renewable energy. But I was concerned that they might hear some disturbing facts. Recently, we were at a film screening of a documentary called The Reluctant Radical. And it's a documentary about a climate change activist. And our kids were in a separate place watching the Lorax. But there were tables of information out at it, and on our way home, our kids were asking us questions about what our movie was about, and our son had really noticed this one poster which said, one planet, one people, 12 years. And he was like, "What does that mean, Mom? That's 12 years. I'm going to be 21. And my husband and I really struggled. I get emotional thinking about it. To describe, this was in reference to the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which was released in the fall, which is an alarming report and has a lot of scary information in it. And so it's a balancing act of trying to explain to our children what is in that report, but also providing them some hope. And I want you to know that I used all of you here tonight and the work that the city of Monona is doing to talk about that hope and to talk about the actions that are being taken. And that really made a difference in our conversation, so thank you for that. As adults, though, we don't have the luxury to ignore the doomsday, and we really need to get up every day and make the choices that are needed for future generations. So thank you, and I hope you pass this resolution.
Thank you, Beth. Lisa Gunlock. Oh, and Beth also wanted to register in favor of the no parking on South Winnequa. Sorry.
Thank you. Hi, Lisa Gunlock, 404 Midland Lane, Monona. I knew what Beth was going to say, and I'm still emotional about it, so excuse me. Thank you for considering the resolution to transition to 100% renewable energy and resilience. The resolution and the actions that will result from it are important for many reasons, many you've heard already. The primary reason I support this is for the future of our children. My husband is home with our two little ones tonight and also fully supports the resolution. The most recent study from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that Beth mentioned warns we have just 12 years to drastically reduce our carbon emissions. That is year 2030. Your leadership to make these changes in Monona, number one, provides hope for the future generations to have a healthy, habitable planet. Number two, allows people like me, who serve on a city committee, to refer to this resolution and know that it will have my back when making important decisions, so that our decisions reflect protecting our planet for future generations. And number three, can save the city financially, as the burden of climate-related events like flooding can fall on the city. I urge you to pass this resolution and to meet your goals early. The goals for the city to be at 100% renewable energy by 2040 and the community by 2050 are not urgent enough. 2030, 12 years, this is the time we have to take swift action.
I will support all of the swift actions that you make. You can count on me as I count on you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa would also like to register in favor of the no parking on Winnequa Road. In addition to the speakers tonight, we have received several, I think 6 or 7 people filled out forms to register in favor of the climate change resolution. Sally Buffett, 4912 Wallace Avenue, Richard Van Driel and Jean Van Driel, both in favor of 5511 Winnequa Road, Sue Vogt, 5502 Goucher Lane, Pat Howell, 4324 Winnequa Road, and Mark Buffett, 4912 Wallace Avenue, all registered in favor. Then I was given a petition that was signed by 60 people, all in favor of the resolution as well. And then in addition, we've received several contacts to the council. Some of these I know are duplicated on this list or here. Beth Esser was one in favor. Katie Kaufman, 203 Stone Terrace in favor. Margaret McEwen Jacobek, 201 Stone Terrace in favor. Jennifer Stofflet, 6010 Ridgewood Avenue in favor. Corey Schmidt, 4419 Shore Acres Road in favor. Suzanne Shireman, 5606 Winnequa Road. She and her husband Jim are both in favor. Merritt Singleton, 6003 Queens Way in favor. David Joranson, 605 Panther Trail in favor. Jeremy Pieper, 6200 Winnequa Road in favor. I think that's all of them. So I'll pass these down to Joan and she can record them all in the minutes. Does anyone else want to speak? Okay. The appearance section is then closed. We have no public hearing tonight. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Next, several items under unfinished business. Item 1A, consideration of ordinance 2-19-714, establishing no parking on South Winnequa Road from March 15th to November 15th, put forward by myself.
Move approval.
Second.
Dan, going to address this at all, or?
Thank you, Mayor. The only change that we have from the first reading is the Public Works Committee did not approve this at the February 6th meeting. Otherwise, there's nothing that's changed for this this ordinance.
I think it was a vote of 4-3. Is that
Right.
correct? Because
Right.
chair doesn't vote. So, any questions, concerns? Andrew, did you have something?
Were there comments or reasoning behind any other kind of explanation behind their vote?
I think the committee members who voted no just felt that it wasn't needed. I don't know if they necessarily agreed with the thought process on this. So.
I think some of them said they didn't think it was a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Anyone else? Doug?
Well, so then we need to just, in that last whereas clause, take out based upon the recommendation of the Public Works Committee at the February 6, 2019 meeting.
It's the 6th whereas. We'll have
Okay.
to remove that.
Yep.
So, is that a motion to amend?
Yeah, or if the second would accept it as a friendly.
I will.
Okay.
Either way.
So we need to vote on that separately, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor, say aye, of the change.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, point of order. I would assume we're only taking out the first part of that?
Right.
Okay. Just making sure. Thank you.
Okay, so back to the original motion as amended. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item 1B, consideration of resolution 19-2-2324, purchase approval of one current model year half-ton pickup truck put forth by the Public Works Director. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dan?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This is here tonight for the second reading. The Public Works Committee did approve this at the February 6th meeting. There is funding in this year's capital budget, $31,000 to make this purchase. It's a purchase of a pickup truck from Ewald Automotive utilizing the state contract. Purchase price $28,844.
Any questions? Discussion? Doug?
More just, I guess, a comment. I know you had looked at a C&G option for this. I was just going to comment, my understanding is Ford is actually going to be coming out with a hybrid F-150 sometime fairly soon. Don't know if they've set a model year, but going forward, I think that's something we should be looking at.
The state pricing typically comes out after November. Our capital budget are usually approved by that time. But we can, I think when we go through capital budget, we can provide two price levels. For instance, right now, if we did the CNG version, it's $39,166 for the base model. Our funding is capped at $31,000 with the capital budget right now. So, in the future when we come forward, we can try and estimate the best we can for that extra cost.
Right. But when we do that, I think we also need to make sure we look at life cycle cost, because it will use less fuel and we'll have fuel savings on a hybrid.
Okay. Anyone else? Alder Moore?
Yeah, just to follow up on Doug's point, my understanding as well, just in relation to the hybrid models, is that the mayors, climate action mayors, of which our mayor is a member, have recently signed a group buy scenario that for hybrid and more high efficiency vehicles that may well exceed whatever the state standards are. They took it upon themselves to take action. As opposed to waiting for our state to move forward. So I don't know that all the ins and outs have come out yet as to what that's going to involve, but but it definitely includes pickups and other types of utility vehicles. So
good to know. Doug?
And I think I misspoke that they're actually looking at an all-electric F-150, not a hybrid.
that's even better.
Anyone else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm
Aye.
sorry. This is a roll call vote. Will the clerk please call the roll? Thank you.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Spate,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kitzler.
Aye.
Alder Core,
Aye.
Alder Groupie.
Aye.
Motion is approved.
Thank you.
Next item, 1C, G1C, consideration of resolution 19-2-2325, approval of a cost-sharing agreement between the City of Madison and the City of Monona for the reconstruction of Atwood Avenue. Is there a motion to approve? And this is put forth by the Public Works Director. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. This also did pass the recommendation of the Public Works Committee on February 6th. Funding is provided in the 2018 capital budget for design, $70,000. The cost of design to date is $68,200. This agreement was also reviewed and approved by Attorney Cole prior to the first reading and what Public Works Committee approved.
Questions? Alder Wood?
Yeah. So from the Public Works meeting, I think the vote was to require no left turns at a couple of the Madison intersections up near, not Walter, but beyond that.
That was for a different agenda item at Public Works. There was a design review.
Oh.
And there was.
Okay,
the
right.
That'll be coming in March
Okay,
to
all
council.
right. Good.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Spate,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kitzler.
Aye.
Alder Core.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item G1D, consideration of resolution 19-2-2321, purchase approval of Parks and Recreation truck put forth by the Parks and Recreation Director. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval?
Second.
Jake?
Good evening. I don't really have anything to add after last meeting, and it's virtually the same type of truck that Public Works Department's purchasing for their department. So duly noted on the suggestions from Alderwood and Moore.
Any questions? Alder Moore?
I would just, as long as we're talking about more efficient vehicles, I would just point out that our fuel budget, and vehicles are really a tough nut, and an important nut in our fuel budget for vehicles represents about 25 to 30% of our overall fuel bill. So getting a grip on them is really important, and one of the ways in which Madison and other communities are doing that is what's called anti-idling technology. We all know that a lot of our service vehicles spend a lot of time in idle, and there is actually anti-idling technology that exists that pays for itself in less than 6 months. So I would ask that all of our departments involved in purchasing vehicles take a look at that technology moving forward as well. Can be installed in existing vehicles that we own.
Okay.
Anyone else? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Coor?
Aye.
Alder Groupie?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye.
Alder Spate?
Aye.
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Alder Kitzler?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Item G1E, consideration of resolution 19-2-2322, allowing beer sales by Parks and Recreation staff during special events in city parks. Also put forth by the Parks and Recreation Director. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
Jake?
I'm sorry, who
Bring
was-
on summer. After these last couple snow events, I think we're all ready for some special events in the park with some beer sales.
Does anyone have any questions about this? I think we discussed it last time quite a bit.
We did.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
I am, unless anyone has an objection, I'm moving items F, G, and H to the end of the meeting, the closed session, so we can keep moving here. Item 2A under new business, and this is start for immediate approval, consideration of resolution 19-2-2236, purchase approval of a Bobcat toolcat put forth by the Parks and Recreation Director.
Move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Move to,
Opposed? Motion passes.
move to approve.
Second.
Jake?
Well, thank you, Mayor, for that rework in the agenda. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
So I passed out, there was a quote that was included in your packet for one of the attachments. After the packet was sent out in conference with the dealership, they had quoted the wrong item for a sand salt spreader. So that is included. I just passed that out. So with my math, the resolution should read not to exceed $63,336.94 would be the total not to exceed with the purchase unit and the attachments. This unit is starred for immediate action. It was recommended for approval at the Parks and Recreation Board at our February 12th meeting. The lead time on these is like 60 days, so trying to get these in before our busy season in April is key. In finance, we talked about this is a new purchase for the department. It is really the most versatile unit that's used in parks maintenance, so all of our surrounding communities are utilizing these. With the increase in the amount of parks and sidewalks over the last decade, the ability to be able to move staff and equipment more efficiently has definitely seen its course over the last couple of years. So what's nice about this, with our Public Works Department having Bobcat skid steer, already owning multiple attachments, these attachments are interchangeable. So a lot of the things that we do in parks and public works are similar, but when we only have one piece of equipment, sometimes cost or sharing it, depending on what our schedules are, can be difficult. So this piece of equipment will be used daily in probably 3/4 of the year, whether it's snow removal in the wintertime, trash recycling collection, mulch, sand, special events. So this will be kind of a workhorse for the department.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Oh, I'm sorry, it's another roll call.
Alder Kitzler?
Aye.
Alder Core?
Aye.
Alder Groupie?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye.
Alder Spate?
Aye.
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item
That is amended.
2B, consideration of resolution 19-2-2237, purchase of approval on an electric vehicle put forth by the Parks and Recreation Director. This is also starred for immediate approval.
Move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jake?
You guys.
I just
Give it to Elder Moore. That's fine.
This was approved during the capital budget process as another means to be able to move our staff and supplies from park to park. So this was approved in the pool budget, but really it will be used by our recreation staff. We have a lot of our programs at Fireman's Park Shelter, so moving supplies back and forth from the community center, typically done by hand. Our employees swell in the summertime. We're the biggest department over 3 months, and so moving people and equipment and special events such as our beer sales in parks will require some additional equipment. So this electric vehicle will be the second in our fleet that we have. We utilized the first one quite a bit last summer. It's a little bit friendlier on our turf from using a full-size pickup truck and is able to move some of our seasonal staff. So this electric vehicle is about a 60-day turnaround, so same reason why we have it started for immediate action. So we're looking forward to having our Buzzy, I think is what the office staff has coined this secondary electric vehicle.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. I'll eventually know this. Joan, would you please call the roll?
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Alder Kitzler?
Aye.
Alder Core?
Aye.
Alder Groupie?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye.
Alder Spate?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Item C, consideration of resolution 19-2-2238, a resolution to address climate change through 100% clean energy and resilience, put forth by the Sustainability Committee. And this is the first read for this, so we won't actually be voting on it until our next meeting.
Mayor, I'm going to be introducing our
Okay.
special guests, so would you like me to stay here, or would you like me up at the podium?
I think you can probably stay there since
Okay.
you have a mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So in your packet tonight, you received 3 documents. 100% Clean Energy and Resiliency Resolution is approved by the Sustainability Committee in January. A single-page summary of the resolution designed as talking points, if you will, for understanding and clarity as you may encounter citizen interest and questions within the community. And the resolution is marked up by City Attorney Bill Cole. Since the packet was assembled, the Sustainability Committee had its February meeting, and we fielded a lot of questions and comments besides from Attorney Cole. As a result, I'd like to start by offering a couple of amendments. Number 1, we'd like to add 2 footnote definitions to the document to aid the reader. Simply definitions. Clean energy is defined as energy efficiency plus emission-free renewable energy, and resiliency as defined as the strengthening of the ability of people and ecosystems to withstand and respond to severe events.
Okay, let's give the city clerk time to get, did you get the first one down?
I'll
there, Joan?
I'll be happy to hand you the wording.
Okay.
That is not included? The wording isn't in the,
It's not in the
Not in
packet,
there.
no.
Okay.
Okay. We approved this
yeah,
after
handing
the
it
packet.
would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
To respond to severe events and ongoing climate changes. The Sustainability Committee, at its meeting last week, again, after the packet was put together, reapproved this resolution, accepting all of Attorney Cole's edits or typos, but did not accept the changes to, related to his comments. The reasoning behind this is that this is not a bill, a policy, an ordinance, or a budget item, but is a resolution which first defines the enormity of the problem, the scope of solutions, and specific goals to get us where we need to go. It's recognition that small steps, or even previous resolutions like 25 by 25, the nibbling around the edges is no longer enough. As we often say, our values need to be reflected in our budgets and actions. A very public pronouncement that we're taking climate change seriously is a first step in holding ourselves accountable and our community holding us accountable. Before I turn it over, I want to give a couple of special shout outs or gratitudes. First, I want to thank all of you in the community who have written and have come tonight to speak about the resolution. Second, I want to thank Brad Brune and Caton Hartnett, our sustainability intern, who have worked tirelessly with the Sustainability Committee, who, trust me, are not always easy. Three, I want to thank the whole Sustainability Committee. And four, I want to thank the mayor, other alders, and Attorney Cole, who have peppered us with lots of good questions, and all I can say is keep them coming. As you all know, I'm not a big fan of resolutions, but here's why I think this one is really important. I can't think of anything more pressing than getting serious about climate change.
Hang on a minute, I think we, now you can, okay.
As Governor Inslee of Washington recently said, if we don't address this, nothing else really matters. It impacts our health and health care, immigration, inequality, social justice, and surely there will be huge economic consequences in ignoring it, not to mention conflicts. Climate change has been a #1 concern of the Department of the Defense for over 50 years. And potentially our own extinction is in the balance. There's nothing but economic gains by embracing the opportunities it offers. We'll be joining Madison and Middleton, among others, in passing such a resolution. This is significant in that we're speaking with one voice to MG&E as our utility, and we'll be able to leverage our progress towards goals as well. The end of the resolution, unlike some others, states the requirement that all cities, committees, and staff are expected to develop changes in policy, ordinances, and strategy to meet our goals. In other words, it has teeth. We expect to result in results, regardless of how stuck our committees or we may be or not be. Just as important, the Sustainability Committee with experts behind us is very game to help each committee craft the best strategies to get us where we need to go. And there's a lot we can do without huge investments, dollar investments. With that, I will turn it over to our special guest tonight, Sherry Gruder. Sherry is a sustainable design specialist and energy specialist at the University of Wisconsin Extension. She provides statewide education and technical assistance on sustainable community development, sustainable energy strategies, and green building to Wisconsin communities, local and state governments, and businesses. She also manages the statewide Energy on Wisconsin program, including a monthly newsletter for the UW Extension State Energy Office, providing information, education, technical assistance, and funding to help communities move forward toward energy independence. She is the author of Solar Energy Financing Guide, Empowering Local Governments. She served on the Renewable Energy Board of the Wisconsin Focus on Energy program for 8 years and on the Wisconsin Office of Energy Independence Committee's Developing and Implementing Energy Independent Communities program. She's a LEED certified accredited professional and served 2 terms on the Government Core Committee. In short, she's an expert and a rock star in this arena, and the Sustainability Committee, and by extension the City of Monona, has been grateful for her guidance in creating this resolution. Sherry?
I just hope my face doesn't stay red for a while.
So, good.
Is that good?
Yeah, so let me put this into, I prepared a brief presentation for you. I had the pleasure of working with the Sustainability Committee on drafting this. And Nancy had asked that I speak to you about it and then answer any questions that you would have on any of the technical aspects or actually anything else that you would want to ask. So, let's see. Okay, this is odd. I don't know why I'm not
Are
getting
you trying to get at the
full
presentation?
screen.
Or we could have the staff come out.
If you go to the bottom.
Just go to slideshow.
Well, yeah, normally I would go to slideshow, but I'm not seeing it on this one. Oh, okay. Thank you. There we go.
Beginning.
Super. Okay. So, I wanted to talk to you about the resolution to address climate change through 100% clean energy and resilience. And as you just heard, there were some amendments that were put forward to the resolution. And those came from the fact that the attorney had looked at the resolution.
Sorry, we have to leave the doors open for open meeting. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go on.
So the attorney had looked at the resolution and had pointed up things that were confusing to him. So we thought that we should add some definitions. So just so that everybody's on the same page with what this resolution's about and what the words in it mean, I think the first one is about clean energy. So the resolution says that we're addressing climate change through 100% clean energy. That is energy efficiency and renewable energy. It doesn't include nuclear, that's not renewable energy. So that was one of his questions. And of course, efficiency, all the scientists have been saying that the way we actually get to 100% renewable energy to cut our greenhouse gas emissions, 50% of that is going to have to come through efficiency. So that is a big part of it. The other part is resilience, and resilience is strengthening the ability of people and ecosystems to withstand and even to respond to severe climate events, but also the more gradual changes that we're feeling from climate change, like 90-degree to 100-degree weather for sustained periods of time. So this resolution is actually addressing climate change through climate mitigation, which is reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that we generate through the power that we use, electricity and fossil fuels, and also in our transportation, in our buildings, and in our infrastructure. And it's also addressing the adaptation side. So if you look at the slide, the top slide obviously are the mitigation, putting in solar to generate electricity instead of getting it from a mix that contains coal, and that's your system actually on one of your buildings. And then if you look at the diagram, that's actually from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it basically shows that we have to get at resilience through mitigation and adaptation both, and that the opening in between is the resilience part, and it's what we are or are not really prepared for, that we are going to have these severe events. And so we're going to try to ready ourselves for them. So the background of the resolution is that Monona's already done so much to move toward resilience, toward sustainability, toward clean energy. And you have a sustainability plan. The mayor signed on to the Climate Mayor's Agreement to support the Paris Accord. And you've been installing renewable energy, you've been doing some energy efficiency measures, and also you're a bike-friendly city, so you're doing a number of things that would begin to address this. What's changed since you signed on to the Energy Independent Communities program, which is getting to 25% renewable energy by 2025, and that was a goal that we set as a state in the Doyle administration, which was actually back in 2008. We created the program. Nancy had said that I had worked on that, developing that. We created that in 2008, rolled it out 2009 and 10. Things have changed so drastically, and of course they've changed from the science community that has told us that, especially in the special report that just came out at the end of last year, that we need to actually very quickly reduce our climate emissions to stabilize them at 1.5 degrees Celsius within the next 12 years. And then also the fourth National Climate Assessment that actually came out of this administration's office, and which also showed the impacts, especially the financial impacts to the country and the regions from it. And then they gave scenarios of how we could actually get to 0% carbon by 2050. And so because of that change, this resolution is asking you to move forward faster and setting out how you might do that and how you would get there. Obviously, you have citizen support. I know people spoke in support before. I was lucky enough to be asked to speak at your climate rally, and I know some of you were there, but we had over, 130 some people show up for that. So there's good support in the community. Why resilience? We all painfully know that we have been having these severe climate events, and the flooding that we just had, and I know Monona suffered flooding years ago as well, is something that's just going to keep being exacerbated and might happen again. And so it's really important economically for people's safety, and also for your ability to continue to operate the city in a way that allows people to live here, children to, be healthy, and businesses to flourish, that somehow we need to stop what's causing the perturbations in the climate. We're not going to be able to stop all of it because there's enough already built up that we're going to have this for another 50 years, even if we get to zero. But it will lessen it, and it will provide a future for our children and our grandchildren. And so this is something that's actually, it is possible. It's going to take a lot of hard work. I know that a lot of people are really concerned about it, and everybody should be, but we can get there, and it's going to take all of us working on it. And so that's why it's so wonderful that you're committing to do this if you, in fact, you pass the resolution. So what the resolution does is it lays out two scenarios. It attacks this in two different ways. How do we get to this 100% clean energy? So it looks at city operations first, which are city buildings, city streets and infrastructure, and city fleet. And it says we need to do energy efficiency, and it sets step goals. And the step goals are starting at 15% reduction in energy use by 2030 and 50% by 2050. And then electricity first, because it's easier to do, is to meet the goals of getting to 100% clean renewable energy for electricity. And it also steps them starting with 35% by 2025, which ups the goal that you already had, And that's because you've already made some really good progress. And also because MG&E is also making progress and changing their energy mix, and that's where you're getting a lot of your energy from. And it gets to 100% by 2030. And then meet energy use with renewables. This is energy use for transportation, heating fuels, that type of thing. That's really harder to do. And so that has a longer timeline, and I don't know where we got 2,300. 20,000. I don't know what year that is. But anyway, I think that was 2030. And 65% by 2030.
Please bring your items to the main desk for checkout, as we cannot check out items after closing. At this time, we will ask all patrons to please exit the building. Thank you.
Anyway, it steps up renewables till 2040. So that will be a harder goal to achieve. We think that the city can achieve the goals faster than the population at large. And of course, it's always important for the cities to lead by example. You have more control over what you do, what you buy, what you use than you do over your residents and your businesses. And then it sets community-wide goals. So we're looking at reducing energy use community-wide, and the goals are less and they're further out. Because it's going to take a concerted effort by a lot of people to make that happen. And so we have an energy reduction use of 10% by 2030 and 40% by 2050. And then meeting electricity needs with renewable energy, again, stepped with many goals in there. Many cities don't have a lot of goals in between. What we find is that if you don't do that, you can't get there by doing it all at the end. And what this does is it tracks how we think the utility is going to be able to gear up, because most of your renewables are going to come from the mix that MG&E provides, since that's your electric service provider. And then meeting energy use with renewables, again, transportation fuels. We hope that transportation infrastructure will have changed by then, aside from maybe a whole transformation more to electric vehicle infrastructure. So here we get the whole community, the businesses and the residents, to 100% by 2050, so 10 years after the city operations does it. In order to do this, it's going to take many key partners. I already talked about the utility, and it's going to take effort and pressure, I think, from all of the communities to do this, and that's why the fact that the other communities surrounding, as well as Madison and Fitchburg and Monona and Middleton, and there will be more, are stepping up their goals, and that is all, as you know, MG&E says, we're your community energy partner, and so they will help try to get to those goals. And it'll take your business alliances, working with your businesses in Monona, also with Dane County. The Dane County Office of Energy and Climate has been meeting with a coalition, and actually the city of Monona is part of that coalition. So Brad's been attending those meetings, and I'm on several working groups of it, and we have a municipal working group. And so aside from doing a plan right now, you're also working to an action plan. You would also be working in concert with the county, because you're a small community, and it's not something you can do yourself. But because the whole area is working on it, we have a real possibility of making these goals. And then just to close, that the benefits of this resolution is are many, actually. One is that it stresses creating equity in energy use so that low and moderate income residents also reap the benefits of this, freeing up, costs of paying for energy bills, high costs of energy bills for other things that they could use, also having the benefits of clean energy. It would also support community-based renewable energy and jobs. That's another thing that's in the resolution. As you put on solar on your roofs, you used a local contractor, Full Spectrum Solar, and they're based in Madison, and that, they're growing, it's creating jobs in our area. It helps to save taxpayer dollars as the city saves energy. You're paying less of tax money toward energy bills. It will help you to become more self-reliant and resilient so that if you have local energy being generated and then eventually solar plus storage, then if a severe event comes out or you need to have a cooling building for elderly people or young people or people whose health are affected by extreme heat, for instance, you would have backup energy, not being reliant on the grid. So eventually that's also a goal that's part of this. And of course it will help abate the health impacts of using fossil fuels especially in lung disease and asthma in children and other people in the population. So that's a summary of how the committee got there and what's going on here, but also county-wide. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Nancy, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I'm shocked that nobody else does. I mean, I've certainly fielded a lot of questions over the last week or so since folks got this, but I'm surprised that there aren't more questions. Let me just address one other definition that I was asked that I thought would come up in the meeting, which is the question that was asked of me is, what does deep decarbonization mean? And because that's in there too, there's lots of jargon in there for you to unpack. That's a piece of it. So let me just say that countries previously set a goal of 30% of reduction in emissions by 2030, and they kind of pat themselves on the back for that. The feeling was that gas-fired power plants and nuclear plants and more efficient internal combustion vehicles were frankly enough by 2030 to address climate change. And then these new reports came out, and the new scientific consensus is that climate stabilization really requires full decarbonization or deep decarbonization. So of our energy system, which means getting to zero net greenhouse gas emissions by 2070. So when we refer in this document to deep decarbonization, it's a recognition that we need to be looking longer term at the same time that we're looking at 2030, 2035, 2040, around that deep decarbonization, and really be looking at emission-free power in vehicles. That really takes a lot of fuels, including nuclear and wood and other fuels and gas that might have previously been in the mix, kind of out of the equation. So that's where that definition comes from.
Jen?
I'm curious how you anticipate this will look at the committee level. For example, if Public Works is looking to purchase a vehicle, how are you anticipating a change to that process based on this resolution?
Great question. And what I would say is that the Sustainability Committee, working with consultants and experts, will be peeling the onion and once again stealing from other communities, if you will, and the work that they've done, because we don't believe in reinventing the wheel, and there's a lot of really good stuff happening just in the immediate area. Madison already has a full plan. We'll be putting together a full plan this year through the Office of Energy Independence grant. You may remember we received, and we hope that will give us a kind of a step-by-step roadmap, if you will. And so we'll be working with respect to that to essentially be able to posit, if you will, opportunities that we think relate to. We would encourage each and every committee to unearth their own opportunities, but we don't expect everybody across the board to become experts in energy efficiency and renewable energy. And so we'll essentially be supporting all of the committees as much as we can to unearth opportunities that we think are valuable. And I can use the vehicles as an example of that, the anti-idling technology that I just mentioned a minute ago. And the kinds of vehicle purchases that we know that Madison and Middleton and others are already making, everything from emergency vehicles like ambulances with better technology, et cetera. And so we'll be providing as much of that information as possible to the committees to the extent that, encouraging the committees to come forward with responsible, enlightened choices as it relates to their budget priorities and this resolution for this council to consider. And we're willing to work with, we'll educate each and every one of the committees as much as needed and really enroll them in this great opportunity we have as much as possible.
Also, I used to chair Madison's Sustainability Committee. We wrote the first two plans. And the other thing we did is we trained city staff about what is sustainability and how to get there. And we created a template. It's actually kind of like a checklist that the staff would have to refer to in making decisions, and then committees looked at those as well. So it said, is this decision going to increase carbon in the air? Is it going to? And so you can run your choices through a test. This isn't sustainable because it's not in keeping with the definition that we have here. So what other choices do we have? And what else is available to us? So there are some really easy tools to use that everybody can look at.
It's going to take a team. It's going to take all of us, to get this done. No question.
Alderwood, did you have a?
Yeah, well, we've got several, but maybe this is, either whoever wants to answer. And the 100% renewable energy goal for city operations, it calls for the 35% of electric needs by 2025, and then 5 years later, 100%. Mm-hmm. And I guess that, obviously, that leap really caught my attention, and wondering, I guess, two things: how feasible is that, and how much will it cost?
Okay. I can't give you a specific cost at the moment. What I can say is that the targets that we put in the resolution we believe to be certainly stretch goals, but realistic goals. Let me just give you a few data points that I gave you earlier. Mm-hmm. As it relates to some possibilities. First of all, it's important for everybody to recognize that we're not talking about 100% renewable energy based on the amount of energy that we currently use. It's not about continuing to ramp up our energy use and trying to chase after it with renewables. It's about bringing down our energy use by 40 to 50% at the same time that we're ramping up on renewables. And so because we're going to be doing that, as we get more efficient, the percentage of renewable usage obviously increases even with what we've got. And I can give you an example of what's just happened in the last 6 months. You may remember in last year's budget, we had LED retrofitting of City Hall, you know, and Brad, I'm going to ask you to correct me if I get the number wrong, but as it stands right now, it looks like we're saving about 63% in energy costs because of that retrofit. So small, is that right? Isn't it 63? Isn't what you said the other night?
Yeah.
Sure.
So we are saving 63% of electricity demand on any fixture on average that we replaced or retrofitted.
Right.
So for every electrical or every light that we retrofitted or replaced, we are saving on average 63% of what the demand for electricity would be on that fixture.
Right. Right. So obviously that wasn't a gigantic expenditure, but it's paying huge dividends. And we have other city buildings, the first and foremost being right where we're sitting right now, where we've already talked to, for instance, Jim Byer, who helped us with the LED work in City Hall, who said that the gains to stand from the library alone are likely bigger than that because of the way the lights are structured here. So in other words, with energy savings, the percentage that we're getting off of our roofs of renewable is actually going to go up because we're going to be reducing our energy usage. Second, the schools, our schools, are very much in play now for solar in a way that they were not when we put solar on top of our city buildings. Because technology has changed. It used to be that you'd have a brand new roof or close to new roof in order to use solar, and that's no longer the case. And we've had several conversations with the superintendent of schools, and they're very, very interested in that. And obviously with the renovation that's going on in the schools right now, it involves a whole lot of energy efficiency from windows to electrical. Third, we're looking.
Can I just say, though, that won't count toward the city reaching their goal?
Yeah, it sure does.
The
Anything that's.
that's the school district. That's different than us.
I would consider that part of the city, which is to say that just as I don't consider the library to be a separate entity, the schools and the government buildings and the library
department.
I understand. They're separate entities, but I'm saying for the purpose of this, resolution, I would say that anything that is under the rubric of city government, civic engagement, we're considering to be city, unless you want us in this resolution to separate out schools.
I think that's kind of misleading, especially since like the new school being Cottage Grove, it's not even here. That's my only.
Okay.
To me, city means municipal owned and operated when we're talking about the city.
Then we can certainly distinguish, if we'd like to do that, as I said, we can distinguish out businesses from residents, and we can distinguish out schools from city.
Well, we're distinguishing city from community, though, aren't we? You've got two different sets of goals for that.
Right. We just, in the resolution, we've just said community-wide, meaning businesses, residents, et cetera. We're not separating out businesses from residents.
Exactly.
It's just one big, and we were doing the same as it related to the city and being inclusive of the schools, but if you don't want to do that, we can certainly look at that as
I would just think of the schools being more part of the community than part of the city, really, but.
Okay.
Could I just?
In any case, we've been in discussion, in any case, we've been in discussion with Dan. The schools are very interested. We're also looking at, we're obviously, within the next 6 years, we're expecting to have we're hoping to have a brand new public safety building that would be a LEED certified building. So in other words, a combination of efficiencies on a whole bunch of different levels and being able to ramp up in some key areas as it relates to renewables, we think we can get to 35%. As it relates to MG&E, MG&E is also ramping up big time. Their original commitment was that they were going to be at 30% by 2030, and they are definitely looking to exceed that at this point, largely because of community demands. And we've already referenced several big projects that they're undertaking. So we expect MG&E to be rising to the occasion, especially if communities like ours are working with them and understanding that they're a partner in this, and we're looking for this to happen. And so, again, we see these goals as doable. And Sherry, I don't know if you want to add to that anymore, what I've already...
I think your points about energy efficiency are really important.
Right.
I think anything that you would build new, you would actually probably build to zero net energy standards.
Right.
There is state funding through Focus on Energy to help do, for any new building, to do energy analyses in the beginning, so that you can model it and get to those goals. So that would be for new. You already are generating, are we at 18%, Brad?
It's between 18 and 20, depending on the year. For instance, this year we only produced 7.8% renewable energy from our solar arrays, but given the amount of rain and cloudy weather that we had, it seems to make sense.
Not to mention snow. But anyway, but if you're at 18% and MG&E ramps up to 38% by 2030, to 30% by 2030, you've already surpassed that just in the renewable energy generation part. So, it'll be, I think the good thing is that the goals that you set when you pass this resolution will direct the plan that's being put together for the city to help you achieve those goals. So it'll look at how do you get there. And what we're doing with Dane County as well is looking on a big scale of not little incremental things, but what are big strategic moves that will get us bigger amounts of energy at once. So one of the things the city of Madison recently did is they bought into solar fields in rural areas that are served by the Columbia Power Plant. They're not in our county, but they still use the same dirty coal that we use here. And by buying the renewable energy credits from that, those installations, they will, in one move, they will be avoiding 35% of, or actually generating 35% of their energy from renewables for municipal buildings, just through that, for all city operations. So it's a matter of strategically thinking big, and a lot of that's going to happen as we move along.
Doug, did you have?
Yeah. So will Madison municipal operations actually get electricity from the solar fields that you just talked about?
No, they're buying the renewable energy credits. So
Right.
what they're doing is they're creating new solar, new renewable energy that they're buying.
Right.
And it will offset the carbon emissions from the Columbia Power Plant, which they're currently getting power, some of their mix from. And so.
Right, okay, I get that part. But it doesn't it doesn't change Madison's municipal operations, though.
Well, it does, because the city's buying it toward their operations, so.
But it's not, they're not using that electricity, you know what I'm saying?
So, yes, I know what you're asking. So, when you create renewable energy behind the meter on a roof of your own building, that energy, those electrons first are going to your building, and then what's excess is going onto the grid. But you don't know from the grid whose electrons you're getting. In other words, if you buy 100% wind from MG&E, right, you pay extra to get 100% wind energy. But that doesn't mean that the electrons from the wind turbines are going into your house or going into your municipal building.
Right.
It means that you've paid in to replace fossil fuel energy with renewable energy. And so that's really how it works, because they don't separate the electrons on the grid. It just
can't
becomes
color code them or
percentages.
something.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So were you done, Nancy? I had a number of questions, but the thrust of my comments and questions is because, and we're going to adopt this resolution, whether it's exactly the way it is now or amended somewhat, or it'll certainly be adopted, I'm sure, in 2 weeks or whenever, March 4th, I think. But when we do it, I want to make sure that we're not just passing it to say, yay for us,
Green more.
we're green, that we're making a commitment to actually implement programs, and that we expect staff to follow that, and that our budgets will follow that. And my assumption is that at least on the front end, it will cost money. We may save money downstream, but there will be upfront cost to implementing the goals, to meeting the goals. And I agree with the mayor that we shouldn't include school energy efficiencies in the city goals, because we don't control what the schools do. So in that part of it, it's fine to include that in the community-wide.
Okay, so you'd like schools included with businesses and residents in the community-wide, as opposed to thinking
Right,
of it
yeah.
in terms of, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Just so as to say, because we don't have any control over what they do. I hope they, do the things we're talking about and more, but we don't have any say over that. Do you expect that we will need to hire a staff person to implement to reach the goals? Trying to get a handle on the cost to some extent, but also if we're going to do it, we're making a commitment to really get serious.
Right. I think I guess I would say a couple of things about that. First of all, as Sherry just pointed out, and to go back to Jennifer's question, I think moving forward, there's a variety of things, both in terms of educating staff and getting staff on board, and also in terms of getting all the committees on board and making sure that we're all rowing in the same boat, if you will, in the same direction. And we don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but we recognize but again, it's going to take a team effort, and I hope everybody can see this as an opportunity to do that, and we're committed to do that as a committee, and to do whatever we can as a committee. I would also say that, and we've talked about this before, Brad's time dedicated to sustainability is now 10%. And that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable even if we didn't pass this resolution, frankly.
How many hours is the intern? Is she about 15 hours a week now?
15 hours a week.
Yeah. It's just, it's a tiny amount of time given, he can spend that 10% just going to joint meetings in the county and with other cities, and continuing to soak up all the information that happens on a day-to-day basis, because this field is growing and changing so quickly. Never mind actually moving projects forward for the city, and we all know how valuable he is to Public Works at the same time. So I think that inevitably we're looking at certainly more time than we've got right now in a staff person, whether that means a part-time, half-time staff or a full-time staff member at this point. It's I can't say. Kind of depends on what our plan looks like. As I said, we're working on the Office of Energy Independence with an Office of Energy Independence grant right now that's going to give us more roadmap in terms of how we get to each target that we've set, and the most promising strategies. And once we have that roadmap, I think we'll have a better idea of what kind of expertise we need to bring in. We can say that that there are additional grants available to support additional expertise. We're already looking at another Office of Energy Independence grant for next year to actually implement some of the plan that we're putting together this year. And there's also additional expertise. Sherry is not the only rock star in the UW system. And she has a lot of very outstanding colleagues as well, and other people, again, in Dane County and other places that are and Renew Wisconsin. I mean, there's a lot of people that are committed to this, and so we're going to be pulling in some of those people as well, as much as we can, to take advantage of that expertise as well.
I guess I would add to that I was on the Energy Generation Committee, one of the working groups actually of the Dane County Climate Coalition. And one of the things one of our areas of how do we get to 100% renewable energy included the county playing a role for the municipalities, so that when you are small and you don't have the staff, it's not that you won't need more, because I agree. I think Brad's really thin here. But is that the county will play some roles in helping to make things happen where they can, and getting the funding to do the plan that you are now having done for you was actually organized through the county and through the Energy and Climate Office of the county. And so we identified in the plan different things that the county could do to help create databases and crunch data and do some of the things to take that burden off of the municipalities from doing that. It won't take all the burden off, but it'll help.
Did you have more?
No.
Anyone else? Jen?
I have a comment.
Okay, I'll let Jennifer go and then you, okay?
That's okay, Chad can go.
You want Chad to go? Chad, you can go ahead.
Okay, well, just a couple of things. So one of the important aspects of this resolution is that it puts pressure on MG&E as our primary electricity supplier to clean up their act and to move faster to 100% renewable. And I know it speaks to that in the ordinance, but by the city making this action, and this is in part an answer to Alder Wood's question, we don't know exactly what the city will ultimately invest in and what our power company will decide to do that might make our action unnecessary. For example, if MG&E were to go entirely to renewable by, say, 2035, because the scope of their investments and their planning and all that is more obvious to the community, they could, in effect, act ahead of the city and other municipalities. And by passing this resolution, we help to exert that pressure. Another comment I wanted to make is that, often we pat ourselves on the back when we buy an electric car, and that's a good thing. It's great to go from the combustion engine to an electric car, but we also have to remind ourselves that if we're charging that vehicle with a coal-fired power plant, we haven't necessarily created a cleaner fueled vehicle. We've simply made it possible to have a renewably charged vehicle. once our electricity is coming from wind and solar and other renewable sources, whether the city invests in those things or whether our power company has done it, it doesn't matter. But if, we buy an electric vehicle and we charge it with coal, we not necessarily accomplish things. But those two things done together, getting rid of the gas-powered vehicle and then having renewable energy, those are two parts of the puzzle that have to come together. So I just wanted to make those two comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, first of all, I want to commend the Sustainability Committee for pushing this forward. Your leadership has been impressive. This is a lofty resolution. And I understand the committee's concerns with Attorney Cole's comments, particularly the last paragraph of the resolution where he removed the word requires and it replaced proclaims the intent of. I keep thinking about what happens when all of us aren't sitting at this table. What happens when it's a different council and we've got a strongly framed resolution that may not mesh with those leaders, and it gets tossed out. We've seen kind of that happen on the federal level. Things that we thought were a done deal, the Clean Water Act. We thought that was fair game, that we were golden, and now that's being threatened. I'm wondering if we softened the language in this, if it would be more sustainable, depending upon not dependent upon who's sitting at in these chairs. Just a thought. So.
Anyone else?
Was she going to say something, Beth?
Pardon?
I was just.
Well,
I have a comment, but I was going to let her.
I guess I would just disagree that by softening it, it would somehow make it less able to stick around. I mean, if we soften the Clean Water Act as an example, do you think that the current administration wouldn't have gone after it? I don't think so. So, I guess where I go to is that this needs to be done. We need to do this. This is, as I said, this is the crisis of our time, and we had several people here tonight speak very eloquently about their children. I know all of us here have children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. I really do think it's that dire, and I think the scientists are telling us it's that dire. And so I just don't think that it can be looked on, and this is what really, again, what this resolution does is it's not a bill, it's not an ordinance, it's not a policy, it's a resolution that really expresses the enormity of the problem and the scope of solutions and the targets to get there. So I guess I would disagree that by softening it and in some way may make it in and of itself more resilient. But
Andrew?
So just likewise, I'll reiterate appreciation for your leadership on this, the Sustainability Committee's work on this, because it is an important conversation, and I think the discussion and the questions are good, and I think it's worthwhile, and it just shows how important this conversation is and just the importance of this action. I think, so I'm more of a person so I'm fully supportive of this. My only hesitancy is the wrong word for it, but I really like to see kind of what are the actual action steps. I think there's some naivete on my side about how do we get residents to do this, and it's an education of myself as well as probably a lot of other residents, right, of how we as a city can really push the community side, right, of it. I'm not concerned, and absolutely 120% support the governmental side, because I think we as a city need to lead by example.
Yeah.
It's just, again, I'm supportive of it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what are all the things that we can do. And I know there's a number of them. But what worries me is, we don't control what MG&E does. However, I do understand this resolution and the passage of it hopefully pushes them ahead, and hopefully other communities do the same. It's just all those kind of non-controllable aspects of it that I just keeps me up at night.
Sure.
And so that's my only kind of general thing. Maybe, I don't know.
Could I
Sure,
respond
so I
to
think,
that?
Please,
Well,
yeah.
I just want to give you an example.
Yeah.
So the mayor of La Crosse looked at the residents in their city. They also have passed a resolution like this, and found that less than a dozen of them have used the home energy assistance program from Focus on Energy.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't improving their energy efficiency. So the mayor issued a climate, or not a climate, he issued a clean energy challenge basically to the residents. And he partnered with their utility and with Focus on Energy and created a program with a goal of getting 100 families to sign up to have energy assessments done on their house, and then provide money to follow up on actually implementing the recommendations and the assessments. And they also looked at equity, so they made it 2-tiered, so there were bigger incentives for people who were low and moderate income. And so the homeowners needed to pay something toward the assessment, and then whatever they implemented, there was money going back to them toward that. So the goal was, they put it out there for 3 months to take applications. The goal was to get 100 people in 3 months. They got over 330 people. And a big percentage of them were low and moderate income. And they've also been tracking how many have gone from the assessment stage to the implementation, and it's amazing. So just that program right there, where, yes, you're not requiring them to do it, but because the mayor put it out, there was money behind it, it was a challenge, and people want to do this, and it helped them to learn how to do it, because there was assistance also in how to do it, made a huge difference, and that was just the first time it was offered. So, that's one example right there of how that can be done. The other thing is, many cities have, and actually MG&E will be, this is part of the Dane County thing, working with businesses to enter their energy use of their facilities, their buildings, into EPA Portfolio Manager. And that's a national, it's a national program that looks at the energy use of buildings of different kinds, so office buildings and hospitals and multifamily buildings and whatever, and it compares them to other buildings like it in the region. So you get a score. It's like an Energy Star score, and you find out where your building is in relation to others. So if you get a score of 75 or above, you've got a good Energy Star building. So if you get a score of 40, you know that compared to other buildings like yours, like your businesses, you're not performing very well. So then, so one of the things is providing software so that businesses' energy use immediately goes into that system, so they get that feedback. Oh my gosh, well, if you're spending money on energy, you're not running an efficient business, right? The more you save, the more efficient you can be. I mean, even if you save, a small restaurant, for instance, I worked with, saved $6,000 in their energy bill. That gave them a marketing budget they didn't have. So putting into place things like that, which allow you to measure where you are, and you can't manage what you don't measure, and then provide help. And there are all sorts of Focus on Energy programs to provide offsets to energy efficiency projects, then people are more likely to do it. And so that's what's happening around us, is facilitating ways for homeowners and businesses to learn and to act and to get assistance in doing it.
How do municipalities track that? I mean, do businesses have to opt in and say, here's my stats for my energy? Does MG&E provide,
Right.
if we set this in place, somebody's going to have to
Right.
track it, right?
So it depends what utility you're using. Xcel is the first one in the state that did this, so all of their clients immediately, their energy usage gets put into Portfolio Manager so they can see it. Right now with MG&E for a homeowner, you can look up your energy use and your neighbor's energy use and you can compare it. But in Stoughton, where they have a municipal utility, they actually, when you get your bill, it tells you what your neighbors, how you're performing compared to your neighbors. So, like, by the way, Hank over here is, saving $30 a month more than you are and using this many fewer kilowatt hours and this much less carbon every year. So, it's that knowledge that really helps. And so, yeah, one of the things we looked at in the Climate Coalition working groups is working with an MG&E to say, we would like you to, upload that information. So it's a client privilege thing, but so it's aggregated data. So it's not like people would know exactly the secrets of the business and how much each manufacturing plant uses and how and what time of the day, but it's data that they could use then to improve their performance.
Gotcha. And then one quick last question is, have you asked Christy or MESBA about this?
Yeah,
Or brought her in
so I was just going to, as a follow-up to what Sherry said, that very much relates to MESBA. In addition to doing this resolution, the other thing that the Sustainability Committee has been working on really for the last year and a half is we're very quickly going to be launching a community survey that is specific to residents around their energy use and energy efficiency, what they've done to try to get a baseline, as well as what things they're interested in terms of the types of strategies that they're interested in moving forward, whether that's a solar group buy or buying panels or joining Green Power Tomorrow, which is also already readily available, as we talked about earlier, doing a focus on energy audit. There's all kinds of things in that survey. And we also have a business survey, same thing, trying to get a baseline of where to educate people, as well as to get a baseline, not in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of what people have done so far for their business or for residents. And Christy and MESBA have very much been a part of the business and will continue to be as that gets rolled out. And the community survey, as I said, we're intending to launch within the next couple of weeks across multiple channels. You'll hear a lot about it. And I would encourage residents to for those of you listening, to keep an eye out for it. It'll be on the website. Because what is Sherry just alluded to, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. We have a low percentage of people in Green Power Tomorrow, too, here in Monona. Overall, it's 3% for MG&E. So there's lots of room for growth there when it's really inexpensive. And there's lots of other ways. When we redesign Renew Monona to make sure that the bulk of our emphasis in Renew Monona is focused on energy efficiency, and potentially even in additional monies available if you want to do something in the renewable front or something like that, as opposed to some other things. So I think there's lots of things that we can do. And we've talked about having something at the plant office and the inspector's office, because one of the things that we've learned from businesses from going to several businesses, including Steve Doring and the Riverfront project, is that most businesses, just like most residents, think that renewable energy is out of reach. And they don't know about half the grant programs or programs that are available that make it very much in reach. And So the idea, and we've heard from several businesses like the vet specialists that are just opening now, that had they known it when they first applied to build a new building in Monona, they probably would have installed solar. They're very environmentally oriented, and God only knows they're open 24/7. They're going to be using lots of energy. So we need to get it in people's hands sooner. We need to get the right information in people's hands sooner, both from the resident standpoint as well as from the business standpoint.
I'd like to wrap this up
Yeah.
soon if we could, because Mr. Held is waiting to give his presentation. Did you have something, Molly?
Just one last comment. I agree it's a very important and excellent discussion. All fine points made tonight. I think Alder Wood brought up a really good point about the upfront costs of this project. And I think given Alder Kitzlar's comments, Rockstar Gruder has given us some really good ideas as well and with the community survey. But I think really making sure that we emphasize communication and clear communication about options and programs and opportunities for residents when we kick this off for real is going to be very important. So I think as far as front-loading that, the communication piece, the marketing piece into those initial costs is going to be very important. That's it.
And I think that's something the Sustainability Committee could play a big role in, is the education part of this.
Yep.
And the county will also be coordinating some of that and providing some of that.
So anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. This will be up for
Thank you again.
consideration at the next meeting. Thank you. Okay. Brad, were you going to introduce, or Dan, or somebody?
Laptop, but sure.
Help me get it set up here.
So this is
Doug, you
Jeff
wanna-
Held
Yeah, I
of
can do
Strand. Or Doug,
Yeah,
you can
sure.
do it.
Okay.
So tonight, Jeff Held from Strand, who was the lead staff person on the engineering report for the Ped Bike Committee, is going to give a presentation, I think about 15 minutes, and then take any questions. This is not something we're not going to be voting on it. It's more just, the report is being submitted to the council. And then after this, the committee is still working, Brad is working on a comprehensive ped bike plan that will incorporate the engineering part, but also other aspects as well, education, enforcement, and so forth. So with that, Jeff, take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me tonight. This is kind of a nice follow-up to the climate change resolution. One of the ways we can reduce energy use in transportation is through making it more convenient and comfortable for people to walk and bicycle. And so I do have a presentation, a slideshow here. It's basically the slideshow we went through at the PIM number 2, which was in September. And we had a couple committee meetings following up, putting some finishing touches on that. But quite a few slides, but I'll go through them pretty efficiently here. And like you said, probably a 10 or 15 minute presentation, and then we can go from there. So the goals for PIM number 2 were to summarize the reason for the study and our progress, to answer questions from the public and have a discussion and to gather.
Could I just say, by PAM, you mean Public Information Meeting?
Correct. Yep, public information meeting, that's right. We had 2 of them during the course of the project. So the presentation will go through reasons for the study, the current status of walking and biking in Monona, some of the goals and objectives that the committee developed. We'll have a map of the key routes, and we'll go through the different types of street sections that are options for those routes based on our work. Talk about some additional improvements like intersection improvements and traffic calming measures, and then next steps at the end. So the reasons for the study include the support of community plans to increase walking and biking, public support, accessibility issues, health and safety. So in terms of the plans, Monona's comprehensive plan, objective 3.1.2, includes such policies as creating an environment conducive to peds and bikes, developing and maintaining a comprehensive system of bike and ped facilities, and when streets are reconstructed, to evaluate the expansion of bike and pedestrian systems, and to require new development to include pedestrian and bicycle accommodations where appropriate. So it's already baked into the comprehensive plan for the city. Community survey in 2012 that was conducted measured the gap between how important a certain function was from the city versus how well it was being accomplished, essentially. And the number 2 and number 4 items on that had the largest gap between the importance and how well it was being accomplished were the sidewalk system in the city, as well as ped and bike accommodations. So that goes back, 6-7 years now. Nationally, the percentage of children walking and biking to school has dropped a lot since 1969. About half did in 1969, and that's kind of flipped in terms of the number of people that tend to be driven, or school children that tend to be driven to school. And that has an impact on traffic. Parents driving students comprise about 10 to 14% of morning rush hour traffic. And of course, the more that people drive to school, the less safe parents feel letting their children walk to school. And so you have kind of a reinforcing condition there. So in Monona itself, based on the survey again, 22% of families with children at Winnequa School let them walk or bike there, yet 70% lived within 2 miles of the school. So clearly there's kind of a built-up demand for improving conditions that way. Just a few photos from around the city here in the last year or so. You've all seen it, and it's a year-round activity. People do bike all through the year, so providing dedicated accommodations can make that easier to do. There's also an accessibility issue for older Americans. 20% over 65 don't drive, and of them, half of the non-drivers stay at home on a given day because of lack of other options. So this affects access to basic services like groceries and appointments. This gentleman was walking back from the grocery store here when Tom Lynch snapped this photo of him. And it's a growing segment of the population, of course. A few more photos. Accessibility for disabled residents is also an issue. And there are health impacts as well. Here we see some of the stats for, on the top is obesity in the United States over the last 20 or so years, diabetes on the bottom, and some of the ways to combat these health issues are by being more active. In Wisconsin, 34% of adults have prediabetes. 9% of adults have diabetes, and about a quarter don't even know that they have it. And of course, there's a cost associated with that annually. And one of the ways to prevent these health issues is to be active. Try going for a 10-minute walk 3 times a day, 5 times a week, which sounds like a lot. That might be a little bit high of a goal, but certainly any increase in activity can help with these issues. Most of the U.S. adult population falls short of the activity guidelines, 55%. However, people that have walkable places to live tend to achieve those guidelines more often. As you can see here with the stats, 43% in walkable communities compared to 27% in less walkable. And people in walkable neighborhoods did 35 to 45 more minutes of moderate intensity physical activity per week. There's also the safety component. Nationally, while fatalities for bicyclists have dropped for people under 20, they've been on the rise for people over 20. And that likely has to do with an increase in daily commuting and that sort of thing. It's definitely a mode that has been increasing. So certainly, nationally, there's a safety component to it. At the first public meeting, someone asked us to look into the stats for Monona itself. You know, we can look at the national stats, but what do the stats say about the city? And so we did that following the first public meeting. The bar graph here are pedestrian and bicyclist crashes in the county from 2010 through 2015. And the table shows how they stack up between Dane County as a whole, City of Madison, and City of Monona. And then it breaks it down as crashes per 1,000 people per population. And so when we look at it per capita, Monona's pedestrian crashes are pretty similar to the county. They're actually a little lower than the City of Madison's. Bike crashes are a little higher than the county and about the same. But we knew anecdotally, and we can also check through census data, that there's also fewer regular cyclists and pedestrians in the city. So we also wanted to look at what the crashes were per sort of regular user. And the best way to do that was to look at the census data. Here we're showing how people get to work for the county, the city of Madison, and the city of Monona. And so you can see there that the percentage of people that regularly walk and bike to work is lower. Now, there's still a lot of recreational bicyclists and pedestrians in the city of Monona, but in terms of a measure of how many people are actually out there walking and biking frequently, this is a pretty good way to do it. And when we look at the crashes per 1,000 commuters instead of per 1,000 people, all of a sudden we see that the crashes is more common, or the rates are higher for city of Monona residents, about 3 times as high for pedestrians and about twice as high for bicyclists. Now, these will bounce around. The bike and pedestrian crashes are pretty low occurrence, and so they're going to vary a lot year to year, but this is looking over a 5-year period. So based on this information, the committee looked at destinations throughout the city. This is showing parks and open space, the commercial in sort of that pinkish salmon color, and then schools and community facilities, and then how the city's existing facilities overlap with those destinations. So as far as sidewalks go, there are about 44 miles of street center line, not including the belt line in city of Monona, and about 13 miles of sidewalk. So about 30% of the streets have sidewalk. And if we look at how that overlaps the destinations, getting east-west is pretty convenient to a lot of the major destinations, but you can see a lack of north-south in particular, west of Monona Drive there. For bicycle routes, these are the designated bike routes through Monona, and again, how they overlap with the sort of common destinations throughout the city. So based on this information, we worked on goals and objectives, presented some draft copies of this at the first public meeting, and then refined it. The overall goal of this effort is to provide safe and convenient pedestrian and bicycle accommodations that connect Monona neighborhoods to community destinations and the greater region. Objectives include providing off-street pedestrian routes to schools, community facilities, parks, and businesses, providing bike route options that connect neighborhoods to schools, community facilities, parks, and businesses, providing high-quality and safe pedestrian and bicycle connections to adjacent communities and regional facilities, and providing street and intersection design that is sustainable, sensitive to Monona's unique context, lowers travel speeds, and safely accommodates pedestrian and bicycle movements. So that's the goals that we were working with, the goals and objectives. So based on that, we developed a map of key routes and key intersections. Those are shown here in the blue, and you can see in the thinner dark blue line underneath are, again, those designated bicycle routes. And so you can see that those are included, but there are also a number of additional routes added, north, south, and east, west. In terms of daily traffic volumes, motor vehicle traffic volumes, those are shown here. Most of those streets, especially when you get sort of the northern half of the city here, relatively modest volumes, pretty comfortable volumes for pedestrians and bicyclists for the most part. Winnequa Road on the south portion, and then Bridge and portions of Frostwoods are sort of the higher volume collector type streets in that area. And so we treated those a little differently than some of the lower volume streets. So for corridor typical sections, so that's basically how you're going to allocate the space on these streets as projects come along to improve conditions. We looked at lower impact and cost improvements or sections. Those were generally would be able to be accomplished with marking and signing and perhaps parking restrictions. So we're not going to remove the curbs. We're not going to relocate where the curb line is. And then there's some higher impact and cost alternatives that would be an option as these streets are reconstructed. In some cases, those would move the curbs. So we kind of started from the low end of volumes and split up the different key routes based on the volumes that they carry, the motor vehicle traffic. These are the lower volume bicycle corridors / boulevards. Most of these have 60 feet of right-of-way and 32 feet of street from face of curb to face of curb. So that includes the gutter. And most of them have parking on one or both sides, no sidewalk, and no bike marking. So we have a range of options here. The lower impact and cost alternative for these very low volume streets includes a pedestrian area on street and parking on one side as an option. That would probably be evaluated case by case as these come along in the list of projects for the city. There could be an option to add sidewalk to some of those streets, but these are the candidates that could potentially go without it. Higher impact and cost alternatives. In order to try and maintain the approximate existing footprint, you could consider narrowing the street up and providing sidewalk off the back of curb if there were a reconstruction and the curbs were going to be moved. Or we have another option on the bottom here that shows perhaps a mix of providing the sidewalk near the back of curb or perhaps moving it back behind the first tree or row of trees. And that's really what the goal of paying attention to the city's unique context is the mature trees and those types of things, and being sure to try to minimize the impacts to those as these projects come along. As we move up in volume here, these are the higher volume bike boulevards and corridors, 750 to 1,500 vehicles per day. Here we're recommending we really don't have a lower impact and cost alternative. We're suggesting really we ought to go to sidewalks right off the bat here. This first alternative keeps the curbs in the same place. It shows parking on one side. Sharrow markings are a bicycle marking that most of you have probably seen. It's a bicycle symbol with a couple of chevrons, basically communicating to drivers that bicycles can use this space and that it's a shared area. We had some discussion about the pros and cons of them, and I think that those decisions whether to use sharrows would be made at the time of design. But they're shown here on these sections as an option. We do show a couple options that narrow the street up again on the bottom here. And one option, those would be narrow enough that you wouldn't have on-street parking. One option that we discuss as a committee is to add parking bays periodically. And so it would be locations where the street gets a little wider and you could have several parking stalls in a row, and that would all be based on existing landscaping and trees and things like that and trying to fit that in. Getting to a little higher volume streets, collectors without sidewalk. This is Owen Road here in Bridge Road and Frostwoods. So these, in some cases, get a little bit wider, 34 feet from face to face. So the first, let's see. Here we're again suggesting to add sidewalks. This section in the middle here shows what was restriped on Bridge and Frostwoods recently, which has a wider shared parking and bicycle space and then a sort of a pedestrian type space on the other side. I think that's working pretty well. Our data shows that it hasn't necessarily reduced speeds because it's still a wide street. And the other thing is that I don't think the parking isn't used terribly often, and so it doesn't have the calming effect that on-street parking sometimes can. So there's still an option to add sidewalk in the future along those routes as well.
And speed tables too, I think we talked about on those too.
Yes, we did. Yep, so some calming measures, speed tables or perhaps raised intersections depending on the level of project involved. So South Winnequa Road is a bit of a unique animal. It actually has, for most of the route shown here, 100 feet of right-of-way. So there's actually a lot more right-of-way along Winnequa than the other streets. But as far as the existing section, it's currently between 32 and 34 feet wide. There's about a 6-foot on-street parking, a 5-foot bike, 18 feet for both lanes, and a 5-foot bike on the other side. And of course, it's a bike and a pedestrian space. And it's really, the widths are not what you'd like to have desirably. It's really a little narrower than you'd want to see for this mix of uses. And so there was the restricted parking this past fall as sort of an experiment. And that's now, I believe, it's going to be sort of March through November implementation. Just to provide that space solely for pedestrians and bicyclists. There's also a project that's planned on this south portion, and the city's going to try to add sidewalks. Going to look at adding sidewalks, and that's going to be in design this year and constructed in 2020. Definitely a critical stretch, higher volume. This would be a real key link to make, especially by adding sidewalks along it. And there's a couple examples of collectors that already have sidewalks, and so for the most part here, you're probably maintaining the conditions that are out there. We showed an option that would restrict parking and add on-street bike. I think that the committee feels like most of the portions of the streets you're seeing up there, that's not necessarily needed, that the bikes are doing okay the way it's currently set up with the on-street parking. There's a few gaps to close in the sidewalk, particularly along Femrite as well. So that's the overall map. There were a few routes that were identified as desirable pedestrian connections as well. And we've got a appendix in the report that basically starts to lay out the priority for these corridors. If you're interested in sort of the real nitty-gritty details, I do have a few slides here on the first round of projects that's coming up in the next year or two. So other improvement types at intersections. So we were talking sort of mostly about down the corridors with those typical sections. Intersections, as they're included in projects, would also be improved. And this is an option along Winnequa here at Maywood, showing the addition of sidewalks, on-street bike, how you carry that bike through the intersection. McKenna, Maywood, and Greenway, the 5-point intersection. This is proposed to be realigned, like what's shown on the right-hand side there, potentially in 2020 as part of the reconstruction project. The idea here is to take this from a five-legged intersection and make it into more of a 4-legged intersection by bringing Maywood in here at a more of a 90-degree angle, and then improving the crosswalks at those locations as well. This is from a previous study, the university report towards a safe routes to school plan. And then some other minor types of additions, bike boxes perhaps at signals. We heard some concerns about trying to make a left turn here at Dean as a bicyclist. So a bike box can help with that. Again, on-street bike is optional on these types of sections. If they're working well as it is, you probably don't need to go that route. And then we're looking at an improved crossing down at Broadway and Falcon Circle, the east portion of Falcon. This really kind of creates a north-south opportunity for bike and pedestrian connectivity that's between Monona Drive and Winnequa, kind of a alternate route for people wanting to go north-south. In terms of traffic calming, the chance of a fatality goes up dramatically with the speed of the motor vehicle, and if we can get those speeds in the 20 to 25 mile an hour range, it's a much safer condition for pedestrians. So the committee in the report recommend to use treatments that have a lower impact on emergency response vehicles. This is one of the items that we talked about. The real low impact would be striping and speed displays and enforcement. Those are the types of treatments that we can implement. We also looked at raised intersections. They're pretty modest in terms of the vertical deflection. The city of Madison installed a few along Monroe Street this last year, and they seem to be working pretty well. So that's an option, and I think that the committee viewed those favorably in terms of emergency response. They should have less impact on emergency vehicles. That's a concrete option or example, and they can be done with asphalt as well. That's what this is showing. So as far as calming goes, the goal, the idea would be to determine the need for and type of features at the time of the near-term improvements. For low-volume corridors with speeds that are under 30 miles per hour, probably marking signage and other minor improvements would be sufficient. You probably wouldn't have to go to the speed tables or the raised intersections. So for next steps, South Winnequa Road, the recommended improvements are a mill and overlay from Bridge to Schluter. An all-way stop at Bridge Road is the current preferred alternative that's in design right now. Remove the intersection bump outs that are out there today and relocate the crossings back to the end of radius, which is where they typically would be. There's a little bit of confusion right now because with the way the bump outs are set up, the crosswalks are kind of a long ways away from the intersections, which is a little unconventional. Sidewalks on both sides where possible. Raised intersections, probably 2 or 3 along this route. Retain the no parking, but create parking bays where feasible, and the no parking would be seasonal. Parking would be allowed in the winter months. So it's expected for engineering and design in 2019 and construction in 2020. A few additional projects that are going to be the first ones out of the gate. McKenna Road reconstruction, with the goal of including sidewalks on both sides, is also going to be in design in 19 and constructed in 2020. And this was one of the projects that spurred this effort, I believe, as well, because there was a desire to add sidewalks, and I think there was feedback of, well, let's have a plan first so we know as these projects come along which ones merit sidewalk and which ones maybe not. Also realigning that 5 Point Maywood McKenna Greenway intersection would be part of that project. On Southtown Drive, there's a path on the east side, and it ends just north of the railroad tracks, south of the Belt Line. And there's really it's a difficult, awkward connection to get to the Capital City Trail south of there. And so the goal is to connect that path to the Cap City Trail, and that's this year or next is for construction on that. And then Atwood Avenue, north of Monona Drive, City of Madison is leading a project up there that your folks have been involved with as well, to add on-street bike lanes along that stretch. So where they end at Cottage Grove Road and Monona Drive, now they would be extended along. That's actually Atwood Avenue as soon as you get north of Cottage Grove there. And that's planned for construction in 2020 also. So a lot of 2020 construction up there. And we do have...
Atwood actually has been pushed back more than likely.
Okay.
At least a year.
Okay. And we do have a list at the end of the report that gets into some more details and lists the projects and sort of grouped by the first group being those that are essentially already planned and in design or will be. And then we have some priority projects that follow that and broken into $1 to $2 million type groupings for construction. The next steps tonight, I think you're considering whether to accept the engineering elements of the plan. So it's important to note that the items that we've been looking at here are really the engineering E of the 5 E's. The bike plan ultimately will include discussion of education, enforcement, evaluation, and equity as well. And Brad's going to be leading the efforts to complete the other E's. So this is kind of one portion of the overall plan that we're looking at tonight. And that's all I had for slides. Happy to answer some questions.
I'm very pleased with how this project is done. You really spent a lot of time, and I think we've got some good results.
Great.
Does anybody have any questions? Comments? Jen?
So for some of these plans where there's essentially 3 different levels of intervention, would we consider doing like an initial level of intervention and then see how traffic patterns change and then potentially do subsequent, or are we looking to do engineering intervention in one shot?
You want to?
Well, I think that the for most of them, most of your streets are not planned for reconstruction. They're going to be on a 10-year, 20-year cycle. I think the ones that are not up and ready for reconstruction would be you'd look at the lower cost and impact type of improvements. So some that are up for reconstruction are the ones that we mentioned, the Winnequa, South Winnequa, and McKenna as well. I don't know if you have other thoughts, Doug, on how it will be approached.
Yeah, well, I think there are some key ones. I mean, a lot of what we're trying to do is create a grid and make north-south sidewalk routes that connect with the existing, what we have now. And some of those, Maywood Road in particular, doesn't really lend itself to the lower level, having on-street pedestrian marked facilities and getting rid of parking. It was, just wouldn't really work. There's not really good other options for parking. So that one I think might be probably an earlier on going to the engineering action, sidewalks, design and build. Some of them, like Bridge and Frostwoods, probably, we may try to do some things like to calm the traffic or lower the traffic speeds, but for now at least keep the on-street pedestrian and bicycle, obviously bicycle, but on-street pedestrian facilities with just pavement markings. Those are just a couple of examples. It's going to depend, I guess, on each particular segment of street. That makes sense.
I was thinking in particular like Frostwoods, and if there's a plan to do sidewalks, could we do the sidewalks first and then determine whether there's a community request for the speed tables? I mean, because if you're getting pedestrians off of the roadway, is there potentially there's less concern about the speed of the traffic?
I'd say that's probably, that seems to be the case now. On Nichols and Dean have about the same speeds as South Winnequa, if not even a mile per hour or so higher, and we don't get the concerns about pedestrian safety because there's sidewalks. Speeds are even, statistically, I think significantly higher on Bridge and Frostwoods. They're 33 miles an hour, I think, which is the 85th percentile speed, so that's getting pretty high. The thing there, I think if you were going to do sidewalks, though, you'd want to move the curbs in because the streets are. So probably, my thought would be we'd probably wait until a road reconstruction project and then bring, narrow the street and put in sidewalks. Because I'm not really sure how much right of way we have up Bridge and Frostwoods either, if we even have enough.
It's pretty narrow.
Yeah, I think it's 60 or 66, yeah.
So we wouldn't have a whole lot of room to play around with behind the curb, the existing curbs.
Molly?
I think to Jen's point specifically about Frostwoods too, that would alleviate, potentially not putting in the speed tables would alleviate some concerns held by public safety and using that as a route for trucks and EMS, so.
Andrew?
I have maybe a more detailed question about sidewalk placement. So some of the recommendations were sidewalks off the curb, I think is how you termed it. And tell me a little bit more. Those are probably not ideal. I mean, I know snow plows is what I'm thinking about, today more than ever.
Yep.
Just how you clear that out. I mean, obviously residents would have to clear it out any which way.
Right.
But just if the ideal situation, how much of a space?
Sure.
Is,
So right off the back of curb, meaning where the curb starts, the sidewalk begins, is not desirable. And typically you'd want to go a little wider if you're going to do that. Usually, rule of thumb is 6 feet minimum. And if you have a sidewalk that's further off and you have a terrace and then the sidewalk, if you have a green space, usually 5-foot sidewalk is pretty comfortable. So there's also issues with sign placement and other things when you have the sidewalk right at the curb. So that would probably be in limited instances when you're trying to avoid larger impacts. I think you'd like to have some terrace and have some separation for snow storage and for sign placement.
Is there an ideal?
Typically 5-foot terrace is what you want. 5-foot terrace, 5-foot sidewalk.
Cool.
A lot of communities, are starting to go wider with the sidewalks too. 6 is a minimum. But the absolute minimum off the back of sidewalk is, or back of curb is usually 6 feet wide.
Thanks.
Nancy?
Yeah, I just have a question of kind of 2 sidewalks versus 1. I know that there's I mean, obviously, when you get to the corner, there's a crossing issue if you've only got the sidewalk on one side, inevitably. But also having listened to some resident concern, not only about sidewalks, but also about combination of sidewalks and trees, even as I know we're going to try to avoid taking out trees. We have a lot of big trees.
We won't miss them all, I promise you that.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if it, you know, I guess I'm wondering if it makes sense to try to, in a sense, get more miles of sidewalks on more street by the application of 1 sidewalk on a, you know, on one or the side or the other versus 2 sidewalks on either side on a smaller number of streets in terms of bang for buck. Or is it all just based on volume?
Yeah, it's a good question. Ideally, the desirable thing would be to have it on both sides. Everywhere you're going to put it on both sides of the street.
Right.
But you do have some unique factors here and some mature trees and some, there's walls, there's retaining walls and things like that in places. And so I think it's really going to have to be a block by block evaluation when it comes time to implement. As far as the cost, I don't know that would be as large a deciding factor because you're probably doing this with projects that are several blocks long and potentially doing other improvements as well. And so I don't know that the cost would be prohibitive to put it on both sides versus only one until you get to the point where you're having to put in new walls or tear down old walls and put new ones back in. We know that there's a portion of Winnequa that's going to be really challenging to get it on both sides, and that'll have to be considered by the design team in the city. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Yeah,
Thanks for being so patient.
I would just like to take the opportunity to thank Jeff and Strand that Tom Lynch was started on it, and he ran off to the city of Madison. Jeff came in, and Josh Drucker worked on it as well. But you guys did a great job, and just kind of watching you go through the report tonight. I mean, I've seen it a lot of times, but it is like, wow, we really put together a whole lot of information and planning, and I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to work with you guys, and I think I'm excited to see it occur over the next number of years.
Yeah.
Been a great job.
I should thank Brad as well
Yes.
for his work, and Dan.
All right.
Police department.
Is there a motion to accept the report?
I'll move to suspend the rules and take this out of order.
Good point.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 I'll move to accept the report.
Second.
I'll second that.
I'm
Any-
giving it to Chad.
Yeah.
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Report is accepted. Thank you. Chad, we're going to move into closed session.
Move to convene in closed session.
Hang on just a minute. It's a little... Okay, we will call you back, okay?
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you.
You're good at what you do, Joan. You're good at what you do.
No, wasn't on there as the Schluter, I guess spade.
Brian,
have you heard anything?
I haven't either. They did terrible. I keep getting messages, but they're never from him. Okay, is there a motion to go into closed
You
session?
need to read the whole thing, Mayor.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. All right, Next item, convene a closed session under Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85, paren 1, paren G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. This is regarding the Four Lakes Yacht Club versus the City of Monona et al. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
To.
And I have Alder Groupie, and then the second.
Second.
Thank you.
Could you call the roll, Joan?
Yes. Alder Spate?
Thank you, guys.
Oh,
He's off the line now.
yeah, he's up. He did agree. I'm stating for the record, he did agree. Alder Wood?
Aye.
Alder Kitzler?
Aye.
Alder Core?
Aye.
Alder Groupie?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye. Okay, we are in closed session. We are back in session. Is there a motion to approve the proposed agreement with Four Lakes Yacht Club contingent on the approval of the Four Lakes Yacht Club?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? All in favor, say aye.
That would be,
Or do we have to?
that'd be a roll call.
We have to have a roll call.
But can I gotta get the motion.
Okay. A motion to approve the proposed settlement with the Four Lakes Yacht Club, contingent on approval of the yacht club
By the
members.
yacht
Is it a proposed settlement or proposed agreement?
Settlement.
Settlement, thank you. Okay, got
Okay.
it. And
So, and you have the,
And I'll do the roll call
Okay.
here. Okay. I'm way over on the roll calls, guys. Okay, Alder Moore,
aye.
Alder Spate,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kitzler,
Aye.
Alder Core,
Aye.
Alder Groupie.
Aye.
Motion passes. Hallelujah. All right, next up is reports of committees, commissions, et cetera. We'll start with Alder Coor.
No report other than to commend the Public Works Department for their continuing cleanup of the snowfall and ice and whatnot we've had over the last month. I've really been impressed, and so particularly the Eastgate Hill.
Alder Kitzler.
No report for today.
Alder Wood.
Just to report that we will have an opening on the License Review Committee in May. Jim Flasterer is resigning, going to be moving to McFarland. So if you know of anybody that would be good or interested, let me or Joan or the mayor know.
Alder Spate.
No report, no?
Not even a weather report?
Well, it's raining and in the fort.
Oh.
Not what you would expect.
Where is it?
That's for sure.
Arizona.
All right. Alder Moore.
I would just like to, two things. One, to repeat just something I said earlier, which is that the Sustainability Committee will be coming out with a community survey shortly on energy. Really encourage citizens, everyone to check in and weigh in. It's a good 5 to 7 minutes of your time. Information that will be very valuable to us as we move ahead. Two would be that there is a facilities committee opening, actually two that we're also looking to fill, if anyone's interested in the facilities committee. And three would be to echo Alder Kerr's comments. I think our Public Works Department has done an outstanding job, and I really appreciate everything they've done.
Could you send Leah and I the information about the facilities committee
I did.
openings? I didn't see it. Did you just send it to Leah maybe? Or?
No, Brad said that he took care of it, so he said that he had already spoken to Lee about it twice.
Okay, I have not seen it. So.
Okay.
Alder Groupie.
No report.
City clerk.
Just a reminder, there's no primary in Monona tomorrow. There is a primary in Madison. However, there is no primary in Monona. So if you're a Madison resident, go out there and vote.
City Administrator Gatto?
Just two quick things. First, this week, Thursday, I believe it's the 21st, I'll be at the MESBA Advisory Committee. It's their first meeting of this group. It's a collection of business owners and policymakers to kind of talk about advocacy on the local, state, and probably county level. So I'll be attending that. And then secondarily, for residents and interested folks, we've kind of reactivated the city's overall Twitter account, which we'll be using to put out content and retweet some of our other city accounts. That's at City of Monona as the Twitter handle for that, and we'll be working on a Facebook page at some point in the future as well.
Okay. City Attorney, do you have anything to? Okay. I had a couple of things. I met with the Distinguished Service Committee a week or two ago. We are going to have a reception again this year, and we're really working on trying to get committee members to come to that. So it's scheduled for April 11th. The invitations for each committee member are going to be included in their packets for the March meetings, and I think we should try to get them in the ones for the end of February too, because otherwise they're going to be getting them too late. We'd like those each to be included as part of your agendas, and Leah will be talking to the staff members about that so that we should be sure that you mention them at the meeting and encourage people to come. I think she'd like an RSVP so we have numbers, because this is a way of saying thank you to all the committee members for putting in their time. So it's going to be at the community center again.
You know the time?
Usually I think we start at like 5:30 and the awards are maybe 6:15 or something like that. We provide a, it's a buffet. I think it's going to be heavy hors d'oeuvres this year. Is that right, Joan?
Yes.
And then, of course, there's a cash bar. And there'll be several people giving them awards for service. And things. So it's usually a nice evening. So we would like to encourage all of you to come and to have you encourage your committee members to come as well. Then in terms of the Facilities Committee and license review, you all received the information about your committee members who are up for reappointment. So if you could let Leah and I know if any of them are not interested in staying on, I guess who is and who might not be, by the end of February, that'd be really good, because we would like to find replacements and take care of appointing them as part of our council reorganization meeting, which will be the third Tuesday of April. And I guess finally, I am leaving town for a couple of weeks on Wednesday, and Doug will be the acting mayor. So I will be available, via phone and email or whatever, but Doug will be here he'll be running the next meeting and whatever, signing papers or whatever comes up, so. Is there a motion to adjourn?
There's appointments.
I didn't even notice that. I'm sorry. Yes, we have one appointment, Glenn Rayberg to the Public Safety Committee, effective immediately through April, at which time we'll reappoint him, because he's completing someone's term. So is there a motion to approve the appointment?
Move.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Finally, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Move to adjourn. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Second.
Aye.
Okay. We are adjourned.
See you, Chad.